2024, one of the greatest years for democracy in recorded history. 8 of the 10 most populous countries voted in national elections. The only 2 that didn't vote were China, which of course has no system of allowing the people to choose their leaders, and Brazil, because Brazil had had their national election before 2024. Everybody went to the polls.
Preliminary results from the world's largest election.
In India, after the country's mammoth elections.
And the largest democratic exercise in the world.
Prize election results.
The people of India have given a verdict that will be remembered for a very long time in Indian politics. And spectacular win.
Sure, in some cases the polls aren't real, like in the case of Russia, but in most cases they were. So you had half of the adult population of the planet was able to voice their views this year. So if you are a proponent of democracy, you just lived through one of the great fantasy years of all time. And yet, a lot of the conversation is about crisis of democracy, threats to democracy, democratic erosion, or democratic backsliding. And so what's going on here? And then let's get to the American case. A lot of analysts confuse rejection of their preferences at the polls with some kind of crisis of democracy. That's a sad but pervasive phenomenon. There can be crises in democratic governance, and there were some issues that are really important, but when that many people, 8 of the 10 most populous countries, more than 2 billion adults, half the adult population of the planet, gets to vote, something good has happened. We could look at Venezuela and how the election was won by the opposition, but the regime in power falsified it and refused to admit, even though the opposition proved with the numbers that they had won. And Venezuela is a challenge for the incoming administration, especially today as we speak. The leader of the opposition, or one of the leaders of the opposition, Machado, was arrested. But let's be honest. It was a great year for democracy, and the democratic erosion, backsliding narrative took a beating. The other people who took a beating were incumbents. Incumbents of all kinds took a beating. And that's because government is not working that well. It's not working that well for majorities of people. It's working for some, but not for enough. And so incumbents on the right and incumbents on the left, the Tory party, in almost 200 years of the existence of that fantastic party, probably the oldest party still in existence in the world. And in the US, the Democrats got punished. And they deserve that punishment. And the vehicle for that punishment at the national level was Donald Trump. But it happened not just nationally, at the federal election level. You had in Ohio, Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown, an incumbent, was punished. You had in Pennsylvania the victory of McCormick, who had lost the last time around in the primary process on the Republican side. He won in Pennsylvania. It's not every case were the incumbents punished, but in many, many cases. The thing about democracy is voters cannot always get what they want, but they can punish what's in front of them for failing to deliver. And we had that election. So millions of people voted for Donald Trump because of who he is and what he represents and what they think or at least hope he might do. And millions more punished the Democrats for who they are, what they've been doing, or what they've been failing to do. Whether that punishment sinks in remains to be seen. Is it an enduring shift?
Correct.
We don't know yet. Too early to tell. So it could well be that Donald Trump is able to consolidate some new quasi-organization of American politics, the way Roosevelt did in 1932 and after, until Reagan. Is Trump capable of that? Is the country on the cusp of that? So now Trump is in a position where, how does he read what happened? Does he overreach? Does he decide that several 10,000s of votes in the 7 swing states, all of which he won, indicates that America is ready for an enduring multi-generational grand transformation? Or are we still a 50-50 country where the voters are poised to punish the incumbents should they fail to deliver at the first opportunity they have to punish them? We'll live to see that soon. And so one can be optimistic about the larger trajectory of America and still be cautious about any massive realignment. It's there for the potential taking, but it doesn't happen automatically, as you know. Let's think of the landslides in American history, just the modern American history of the landslides. More or less 4. Roosevelt, landslide, which was enduring. The country was changed. It was not just realigned politically, but it was fundamentally changed in its institutions. One can argue for better or for worse, but it was big. The next one, Lyndon Johnson. Remember 64?
64.
Barry Goldwater.
Got buried.
Completely. Lyndon Johnson didn't even run again. He was gone. He's a one-term president. What kind of landslide was that? It was a false landslide because it was the end, not yet, but it was the coming of the end of the Roosevelt realignment domestic transformation. Because the next big landslide turns out to be Reagan. And it's the Goldwater platform that is on the other side of the landslide. Not 100%, of course. Reagan was not Goldwater. But there's enough overlap between 64 and 84, where one is a landslide one way and the other is a landslide another way, to think that's interesting. And that was another realignment of the political structures in the U.S. and a partial, not a complete, but a partial change, fundamental change of the domestic institutions. There was a deregulation, tax cuts, commitment to free enterprise, commitment to strength abroad. For some people, it didn't go far enough. You have your 2 big fundamental transformations, realignments. We could have talked about Nixon's landslide, and he resigns not long after his landslide. So LBJ and Nixon, gone in a flash. FDR and Reagan, much more enduring. Different ways. Fundamental realignments in political terms, and even bigger in institutional and socioeconomic, they don't happen very often. They happen less frequently than landslides, and landslides are also infrequent. Certainly nothing since Reagan. It would be a tall order for us to have a Reagan-esque moment in that direction. It would be about Trump being Reagan-esque, and it'd be about real policies getting through the political system, not executive orders, but laws passed by the Congress. It would be about renewing community ties across the country at all levels. We're seeing some of that at the state level, below the state level, in the counties. There's a lot of optimism in many places across the country. Ironically, the tech revolution has not just empowered the coasts, but moved beyond the coasts into the interior, empowering a lot of places in the interior in extremely positive ways. And so there's a lot of renewal underway, and there's a hunger for renewal. Is there the political entrepreneurialism, which requires not just a president? Remember, Reagan's partner was Tip O'Neill from the other party. Mm-hmm. It requires a lot, but the system has delivered this before, and it can deliver. We were at a much lower point in the 70s than any time we've reached since then, whether you're talking about polarization, violence in the society, economic stagnation, inflation. Things have been imperfect more recently, But there has been nothing like the 70s, which of course Reagan reversed. Not alone, but he was a huge part of that. So one can be optimistic about the possibility, but it doesn't happen automatically. It requires agency. It requires that deft touch, that political entrepreneur, the person with a vision, not just with a news cycle. It requires cooperation across the aisle.